Good morning, good afternoon, and to some of you joining us from around the world, good evening. Welcome to this special conversation entitled From the Base to the Face of the Democratic Party. Kamala Harris, Black Women, and Misogynoir in the 2020 election. I'm Kimberle Crenshaw, and on behalf of my co-conspirator on this, Barbara Arnwine, we welcome you to this special morning, a reflection on a history-making night at the Democratic National Convention. Now, unless you've been seriously taking a break from all media, you know that Senator Kamala Harris became the first Black woman to accept the vice presidential nomination for a major political party last night, standing on the shoulders of Shirley Chisholm, Fannie Lou Hamer, and so many others. She also became the first woman of South Asian descent, the first graduate of a HBCU, and the first AKA, I suspect we'll be seeing a whole lot of pink and green in the next several weeks, to be nominated for the second highest office in the land. Fist pump to the AKAs from the Crimson and Cream over here. So there was a lot of history being made last night. But let's be honest, you might not have gotten much of a sense of that if you only watched the after show on any of the major networks last night or this morning. So for a few hours, I duly watched all the punditry across the platforms, hoping to hear discussions about the meaning of what we saw, what lies ahead, the racist and sexist gauntlet that Harris has already had to face, or talking points that one would assume the Democratic-leaning pundits had already rehearsed in response to this moment. But not surprisingly, the commentators didn't really engage it, however vigorously a few of them, and here I have to say mostly it was the few people of color on the shows, tried to raise it. And our white sisters, not so much at all. So having been around the block for a minute, I guess what we saw was pretty much what we could have expected, which is why we anticipated that we might just want to reserve some space to have our say this morning. So we've come together not only to talk about what happened last night, but to assess what this moment portends more broadly for Black women and politics in 2020. Now, there's one thing we all know, and that is that the success of the Democratic Party turns on the outside influence of its most loyal constituency, and that's Black women. In every election since 1980, when Ronald Reagan was first elected, Black women have been the most loyal to the Democratic nominee. More recently, they were the constituency upon which Barack Obama built his presidential bids. And in 2016, in the debacle that put 45 in the White House, they cast their vote to the Democratic nominee to the tune of 98%. And let's not forget their role in Doug Jones' defeat of Roy Moore in Alabama and the so-called blue wave of the 2018 midterm elections. That's a non-presidential election year. But for all that energy, it seems like the Dems don't always want to dance with us at the party that we brought them to. Is there just a little bit of that aftertaste of unrequited love in all of this? Or to use another metaphor, Black women have been the wheels on the Democratic bus for a long time, but will we ever sit in the driver's seat? So now that Kamala Harris is the vice presidential nominee, is it all good with us and the Democrats? Or is there much more that the party needs to be doing? And what about how Harris's unique position as a Black woman has put her directly in the path of misogynoir, the term introduced by Moya Bailey and Trudy to describe the particular dimensions of racist misogyny? How has this surfaced inside and outside the Democratic Party? And how are we all implicated in what happens to Kamala Harris? Are the various constituencies that claim her doing enough to defend her? Well, these are the questions that might have been asked and answered last night if our guest this morning had been part of the conversation. So consider this the sort of rewind of last night with a little bit more color in the mix. You've heard that conversation. Now, here's our turn with an amazing group of women sitting around the virtual table. Let's call it Black Women's View on the Capitol. So my guests include Barbara Arnwine, the president and founder of the Transformative Justice Coalition, former executive director of the Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights Under Law, trailblazing leader in the protection of voting rights, and adjunct instructor with me at Columbia Law School. Donna Brazile, the endowed chair of public policy lecture series at Howard University and adjunct faculty at the Women and Gender Studies program at Georgetown University, a Fox News contributor and at-large delegate to the 2020 Democratic Convention and former interim chair of the Democratic National Committee. State's Attorney Kim Foxx, who serves as the first African-American state's attorney for Cook County, Illinois, overseeing the second largest prosecutor's office in the nation. She was elected to that position in November of 2016 after running on a platform of criminal justice reform. Since then, she's gained national attention as a reform-minded prosecutor alongside others such as Rachel Rollins and Kimberle Gardner. And Kirsten West Savali, an executive producer at Essence Magazine, most recently serving as the magazine's senior editor of News and Politics. In Kirsten's writing, she explores the intersections of race, social justice, feminism, and politics, and is the recipient of the Jarrett Medal for Journalistic Excellence, which honors exemplary reporting on Black life in America. After our opening roundtable, we'll then welcome Representative Maxine Waters to the conversation. As her time approaches, I'll say a few more words about the icon that is Representative Waters, but suffice it to say, we're all over the moon that she's making time to join us today. So without further ado, let's dive in on what we haven't seen since Kamala's historic speech, a group of Black women reacting to the first Black woman to be nominated for the Vice President of the United States. So let's reflect a bit on what we saw last night. First of all, I'm going to turn to you, Donna. This is the first time a Black woman has given a speech as the vice presidential nominee. Did she face any unique challenges in meeting this historic moment, and what were your takeaways?
Well, first of all, it's such a great honor to be with all of you. I am a great admirer, and of course, I would be remiss if I didn't say that Barbara has kept me out of jail for many, many decades. So thank you all, and it is a great honor to be here during this historic moment. I think as the nominee, Senator Harris had to do several things. One, introduce herself to the country. And while we often believe that we know someone, unless she's able to speak in her own words, her own voice, to shape her narrative, it's difficult to have someone of her unique background to be able to tell the country and tell the world who she is, what she stands for, and what she hopes to accomplish. The second thing she had to do was amplify the record and the values of Joe Biden and why she accepted this nomination. As you know, at 10:57 p.m. last night, she finally said, I accept the nomination. And she spent the next 7 to 9 minutes talking about Joe Biden, his values, and then she again switched topics again, which is necessary as a vice presidential candidate, where she then began to prosecute the case on Donald Trump and Mike Pence. I think that was the last 3 minutes. You might remember some of the words, there's no vaccine for racism. She knows who a predator is or what a predator is. And then, of course, she talked about his mishandling, Donald Trump mishandling of COVID and so many other issues. But I think in that opening frame, when she talked about her background, her family, when she talked about her roots, not just at Howard University, but why she became a lawyer, why she got involved in public service. That was an important moment because already we've seen the media try to pigeonhole her, sort of box her in with words that really don't describe who she is. And I think for Black women in politics, for women, period, but for Black women, we're invisible. Our story has never been told. The country really don't know us. And I watched in horror last night after her remarks, which, by the way, I was inspired by her remarks. But of course, without a crowd in a virtual context, it's very difficult to see the kind of energy displayed when someone is speaking from a podium. But afterwards, Fox News came to me after one or two other analysts had an opportunity to talk. And I said, wait a minute. I mean, the room was filled. It was filled with our ancestors. She mentioned the shoulders that she stood upon.
Right.
They are there with her. I had to bring up the notion that she was a historic candidate, that we've only seen this now from a major political party 3 times. And this is only the 4th time in our history that we have seen this. I mean, of course, we saw it when Geraldine Ferraro accepted it. We saw it when Sarah Palin in 2008, at the Republican convention, Hillary Clinton in 2016, and now this time. So I think we have 3 things that we must constantly do. I agree. We got to fill the airwaves. We got to fill the newspapers. I don't know if you noticed, I got a column in USA Today.
Yes,
I mean,
we did.
I wrote it. I mean, I was sitting there.
You were on top of it.
I was writing and chewing gum. I was talking, and because if we don't tell our stories, Toni Morrison said, if we don't shape our own narrative, if we don't tell the American people who we are, I had to remind my colleagues. I said, she was speaking for my mother, who was a maid. She was speaking for my grandmother. She was speaking for teachers. She was speaking for those who pick cotton. I mean, people lose sight of history. And if we don't remind them of this historic moment, but my last point, we also have to define leadership and what Black women, I look at my sister Foxx. One day before I went on Foxx, I was watching you on Facebook. I know how to use all these tools now. And I was watching you and how you described what was happening in Chicago. And we have to counter these narratives with facts, and yes, by telling our story. So I want to say thank you, because every time, whether it's a major incident like we saw this past summer, whether it's COVID, and now the historic candidacy of Kamala Harris, we have to describe it. I have so much that I want to say throughout this conversation, because here's why I want to say it, and this is why this is an important day for all of us. And I cleared my schedule because this is so important. And I'm a former chair, I'm a former campaign manager, so I think I know what I'm talking about. I have more campaigns under my belt than most Americans, all right? If we don't request what we need in order to help Joe Biden and Kamala Harris win, then we're gonna lose. We need to tell them what we need to win. What do you need to win? What do you need to get the message out? And I'm not talking about crumb money. I'm talking about investment so that we can lift those who are running at that level that people know. They know their city council person. They know their DA. They know the people who are running locally. Sometimes they don't know Biden Harris, but they know who's running for state legislature. So we have to tell our story, and we will need resources, because we're going to have to empower people to carry this ticket to the White House. And I'll talk about the Electoral College later. I'll talk about the resources. I'll talk about the polling. But I'm just so happy that on this last day of this virtual convention, that I get to talk to you, and we get to talk about what we need. Because I'm tired of people telling me what I need. I know what I need. You know what you need. And this is not going to be an easy lift. We're going to need resources, because they're already coming after our vote. With that, I'll yield back the balance of my.
Thank you, Donna, for getting us fired up. And we're so fortunate to have you to help us think about every stage of this, because some part of it, I think there's this assumption that because this was a history-making moment, that in turn is going to be the key to the turnout. And people are getting it twisted if they don't understand that there's not magic in this. This is about real resources, real mobilization, and giving people something to be mobilized around, all the things that need to be talked about from a Black woman's perspective, which is why I'm so glad we're doing this. One of the resources that's important is interpretive resources, right? Having people to tell the story. So yes, Kamala told a story, but there were what, maybe two people who were able to actually lift up what that story was in the commentary space. When she did the name checking of all the Black women on whose shoulders she stood, how many of those commentators had a clue about who those people were? Right? So when they don't have a clue, rather than ask a question, they jump over the conversation and go to something else, which at least I think maybe what happened last night, but who am I? So I'm going to ask you. Kirsten, what did you see last night in the coverage of Kamala's speech and what the conversation was? What was there? What wasn't there? You're muted. Let's see if we can get you unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. You know, I saw men speaking and I saw white women speaking for the most part. I think I saw Joy Reid for a little bit, you know, who was amazing per usual. What we miss in these conversations, I think, is the nuance and the texture and the contours that only Black women can bring to this conversation, because we know how to hold everything that we need to hold. We know we need to talk about her record. We need to talk about her politics, but we also need to talk about the fact that she is experiencing so much hate across the board, you know, so much hate, even before this conversation. And we were announcing this conversation, someone responded with, since when do you ever see Indian women and white women have a panel to discuss misogyny and how they hate their men, but leave it to Black women to have that conversation? That we're not able to hold space in the national imagination and national reality to talk about what we need and what we want. So that's typically what I see missing, and I saw it missing a lot last night, where we had to kind of shoehorn in the historic aspect of her announcement. And, you know, Donna Brazile said it brilliantly, is that if we don't talk about that history, if we can contextualize it, then no one else will. In journalism, I often say, you know, there's this thing about objectivity and versus advocacy. And the thing about objectivity is we can't start in the middle, right? We can't start in the middle of a story and pretend that we're telling the facts. So if we don't talk about the fact that Black women are historically and currently at the intersections of state and sexual violence, if we don't talk about the fact that because Kamala is married to a white man, she's being called a bed wench by Black men, if we don't talk about the fact that, you know, they're saying that because she's Jamaican, her father is Jamaican, then she's not really Black. And we don't talk about it in the context of the transatlantic slave trade, and the ships didn't just come to the US, right? Mm-hmm. That they were in Jamaica and our people are in Jamaica. Then we get caught in these conversations around nationalism that don't really tell the full, complete story of Black women. And one more thing I will say about her speech is that I felt like, and I've been really critical of the senator, I won't dance around that. I felt like her speech last night was one where it reflected the influence that Black women have had, Black women activists, organizers have had on her thinking and on her politics and on how she's going to position herself going forward. She could have easily used this kind of obfuscating Obamian kind of Black Lives Matter, no more, no less situation. But she centered Black women from the time she stepped on that stage. And that matters. You know, I still hear the ski wing in my head from last night when she said, my beloved Alpha Kappa Alpha. And, you know, we can talk about symbolism and representation a lot more later, but I just want to mention that the idea and the reality that she expended some political capital within the first minute of her speech matters.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I wonder in that speech whether we also saw the influence of some of the reservations or concerns about her being too powerful, being too much, you know, the Black woman. I'm mindful of the fact that when Obama first ran, Michelle was giving great speeches. And then at some point there was this, let's kind of pack it in a little bit. There was that cover of, I can't remember whether it was New York or New York Magazine that had a picture of her with a big afro doing a fist pump.
Fist pump.
You know, it's sort of, you know, the caricature of Black women who are leaders. Is a picture of a Black woman out of control, a scary, you know, Black woman. So how is it, Kirsten, that you think perhaps this backdrop may, at some in some way, help constitute the very tight rope that she's going to have to be walking, running for potentially eventually the leader of the free world, as they say.
You know, she's running now. She's running for president now. We know that, and I think it's unfortunate, but it's our reality that we have to hold that, right? We have to step into a space. I see it for myself in my profession. I see it personally if I'm talking about my kids and I'm talking about, you know, my late husband, then it's like, oh, let's embrace it. Let's talk about it. When I talk about, you know, the racism that we face, when I talk about how white women want to talk about allyship and solidarity, when we're critical of not just conservative politics, but kind of the liberal politics that arm in arm sometimes, you know, make us and victimize us in these ways, then it's a problem. And what we saw in her speech, I think, was this idea of, let me be a little bit softer, right? Let me not show that I'm this ambitious, right? And I'm not a proponent of naked ambition without principle. But when we talk about ambition, we should have the right to be ambitious. We should have the right to say, I am a leader and I know what I'm talking about, as opposed to having to talk about Mamala and the kids and Sunday dinner and, you know, Doug and Cole and Ella, which is great, you know, which is great. But right now in this moment, with almost 200,000 people dead from COVID, with a president who is just an imbecile, who has no idea what he's doing, who is a clear, you know, misogynist, a clear someone who is a proponent of white supremacist policies. We need a Black woman to say, I understand from not just being a woman, but being a Black woman, and I'm unapologetic in that. So I did not really, it was almost cringeworthy a little bit. We talked about just a little bit, you don't have to do that. You know, you don't have to soften yourself. You can stand in your full power and say what needs to be said.
And the question, though, is, do we have to do that, right? Because even within our own community, there is still a long-standing embarrassment about the leadership of Black women, a long-standing sense that there's some kind of gender disrepair in our community. There are entire policies, you know, that are based on this idea that there's something amiss about, you know, Black women's leadership. So if we can't really get on the same page about how one of our greatest assets is Black women's leadership, if we can't do it in our own squad, how do we expect the American public to be able to read African-American women's leadership and see it as the great value that it is, especially, you know, we can't talk about that. And so for that, let me come over to you, State's Attorney Foxx, because you're in the middle of being a Black woman leader. You are in the middle of seeing what the face of Misogynoir looks like when you are exercising the powers of your office. So from your vantage point and your experiences, what does she have to look forward to in terms of some of the challenges and the way that Misogynoir shows up, particularly for Black women leaders?
You know, I think she already knows. I mean, when you talk about showing up in the fullness of who she is, how she got to that stage last night was having made history as the first Black woman district attorney in San Francisco. I think the first Black woman district attorney in the state of California. And for context, when we've talked about this is a field that is largely male and largely white. 79% of elected prosecutors are white men. 16% are white women. That last 5%, 4% are men of color, and less than 1% are women of color.
Wow.
And so I think we have to remember that. I think we to the point that was made earlier, like she shows up last night, she didn't hatch. Like there was a journey that came with that. And particularly doing this type of work, I can speak from my own experience. When you are someone who is not in that profession, right? Your mere presence is a disruption. Your mere presence, how are you going to view this system that has historically seen you on the other side of it when you are leading it? And, you know, I wish too, to Kristen's point, that there was conversation about that when she talked about racism being not curable by a vaccine, how it shows up and harms our bodies in all the ways that she has seen it from the criminal justice space. As we talk about where we are in the summer of George Floyd, what does that mean when she talks about and wants to reconcile the history of having been a prosecutor and doing that as a woman and as a Black woman? And so I know she has seen the misogyny, the misogynoir, because I see it. I see it every day. And it is almost suffocating to not have enough of us talk about what that looks like. In a summer of such discontent, where we have, Chicago's got a summer of violence, we have looting, and the language that is being used around what's happening dripping with racism, dripping. And my response is dripped with this lens of, well, what is the Black woman going to say to justify how her people are acting? That's happening. And I know she has seen that. I know that the journey to get there as the first one and the district attorney level, and then as an attorney general to where she is now, was rich with that. And so, it's not so much what she has to look forward to. I think, what is she going to tap into and share about what this journey looks like? Because I think where we celebrate her being on that stage last night is we talk about the people who came before her in all of it, whether it is the big names of Shirley Chisholm or, Kamala Harris herself or Shamala's mother. I think for Black women, we want to say, tell it and tell it all. Right? That there's this instinct to call it magical, what we do. This isn't magic at all. It is surviving and thriving despite the magic, the hocus pocus of trying to disappear us. And we weren't disappeared. You pulled the curtain back, we were still there. But I think having gone through and going through this daily, doing this work and seeing the misogynoir and being incredibly frustrated that it doesn't get voice, that it doesn't get validated, that for Black women in all of our spaces this summer where people have said, oh my gosh, I didn't know that was happening. And it's because you didn't see me. And I think the hope that so many of us have with Kamala on that stage, Senator Harris on that stage, is that you are one of us, you see us, you know us, amplify all of this for us. And I will say she did, not only shout out the AK, she shout out the entire Divine Nine. And so I ooped from my couch because I felt seen. But that's the point. I felt seen in that moment in a way that other people would not have been able to even recognize. And even afterwards, to the point that was made earlier, there was no conversation. Well, who was that she was talking about this? What is that? Yeah. But for those of us who felt seen, I think the expectation is that there will be even more amplification, that there's a greater responsibility to not just talk and check off the box that we talked about race. Talk about it personally, what this looks like, how you navigate this, how you have a career. And it's the same career I have, where you have locked up Black people. And what that means as a Black woman to do that, and how we have to do that balance and not run from it. These are real conversations that we should be having about where our system is, but you get more credibility on how we reform it if we own that and own what it was like to do that in a Black woman's body.
Yeah. And there's so much there that I hope we can come back and unpack a little bit more, but there is this sense that, there may be some tension between our expectation that she say it all, and that we have the hard conversations that we've all alluded to. There are some hard conversations to be had about locking up Black people. There are hard conversations about reform. There are hard conversations about exercising power in the body of a Black woman. And whereas we know that these are the conversations to be had, I think the $1 million question is, do the decision makers in the party know that these are the conversations that have to be had? It's not just like putting her on there is going to be the magic, right? Because there is no magic here. And this is about real mobilization. Part of the question is what kind of conversations need to be had inside our community about the gender dimensions of this nomination. And so for this, I'm going to come around to you, Barbara. So, we can look at each space and say, there are conversations to be had about Kamala Harris as the nominee in order to mobilize this constituency towards action. It's going to have to happen among women writ large because she's Black. It's going to have to happen between Black people because she's a woman. It's going to have to happen between South Asians because she's a Black South Asian. So this isn't just we're going to add up the Black folks and add up the women and add up the South Asians and add up, the progressive. It's not going to happen like that. So we're looking for the conversations that need to happen. So what kind of conversation needs to happen among Black folk in particular about Kamala being a woman, about patriarchy, about sexism?
Well, thank you. I mean, first of all, the tendency in the parties and the tendency of the pundits and everybody is to run away from the discussion. I mean, that's what everybody does, as if the discussion isn't happening. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the era. I mean, already we see this in the white talk, all the talk about, calling her the H word, the MB word, the B word, all of this is happening. And it's, the bed witch, all that stuff is happening, folks. I mean, we're playing games with ourselves. If we think that somehow there is no conversation, there's an active conversation. And it's a very anti-Black women conversation. And what's at stake here is not just the image of Harris, it's the othering of all of us. And it's the central messaging here is that what we know. I mean, I'm glad that you're showing the t-shirt right now.
Sold on Amazon.com, just let me say. But go ahead.
Yes. I mean, look at it. And I just want to, think about where you've ever seen anybody, even when a woman, even when we've known, political figures that married women who were strippers, etc. We never seen this mess. And I want to, we knew that we were going to have to deal with her running as a VP candidate being politicized. We knew it was going to be culturalized. But Lord, look at it being commercialized, the Black womanism. And I want us to understand, I spent years, as Donna knows, I've learned so much from her and watched her, be, just an amazing leader in this space. And she's been so central to my understanding of, politics and so wise. And I've sat at her feet and learned a lot. And I want to say to people, that, that you got to understand that all of this is part of voter suppression. Mm-hmm. We got all kinds of voter suppression going on. We got the voter suppression of the USPS. Who would have ever thought we would have an era where a president and his cronies would be running around taking away collection boxes.
It's insane.
Destroying sorting machines. That they would be lying about vote by mail, even though, as you know, from my vantage point, there's a whole lot of problems with vote by mail. And that there would be all of these efforts to impede people's ability to vote. But also voter suppression, people get it wrong. It's not just all these devices and practices and procedures and all of this. The biggest one is discouragement. It's simply making people think it's not worth voting and thinking that their vote won't count. And we know that Putin's number one objective in working with this administration has been to destroy confidence in all of our institutions, and none is more important in destroying confidence in their vantage point is then in the vote. And you see what Americans are saying. Very few Americans now have confidence in the vote. And so using this voter suppression methodology of saying, she's not Black. Saying she's not a worthy Black, saying that she's too ambitious, she's the angry Black woman. All of these tropes are being used to discourage vote, to discourage her appeal, to discourage people's engagement, and to say the ugliest one. I mean, the H word is bad enough, but this she hates Black men stuff is outrageous. And I think, we got to go to that because so many people are buying into it. They're hearing it. And if it's repeated enough, they don't know if they're listening to box trolls or what, but they will let it get into their head. So it is critical that we understand that we got a couple of roles here as Black women. One is that we got to address it. We can't sit around and pretend that this anti-Black women messaging is not happening, that this misogynoir is not real. We got to just put it out there and center it. And if we had been on any of those shows last night, that would have come out. We have to make sure that not only do we address it, that we confront it at all levels. Not just, the anti-white, because, absolutely Limbaugh and the rest of the crowd are out of control running with this Black woman trope. But we also got to confront it internally. We got to talk to our men about it. We got to be very, honest about what's going on. And we got to try to fight all this nonsense about she's not Black, etc. We also have to organize around it. Black women have been making the determinations around presidents since 1992. Let's be honest. If you go back and look at Clinton's first election, Black women had a huge role. And we need to be very solid in our organizing to make sure that we are out there in a way. And I'm not talking about, listen, I'm not being partisan here, but I'm talking about we got to make sure that we're voting. We got to talk to our men and we got to make sure that we're voting on the right information and not on a bunch of nonsense, disinformation, and hateful messaging. So I just want to, we have a huge role in this. That's why we needed this panel today, because we got to really look at who we are in this moment, how we respond to this moment, what we do in this moment, because it's determinative. She brought her squad with her last night. When she read the roll call of Black women warriors, she brought her squad, but we have to be the real squad. We got to be out there in the real space, calling this stuff down, because if we allow her to be taken out on this basis, then how does any of us ever survive?
Right.
How does any of us grow? How does any of us dominate? How does any of us become the powerhouses that Black women are meant to be, that God put us on this earth to be? Not coincidentally, not accidentally. We were endowed with these powers for our special voice, our special perspectives, our special, humanistic vantage points. It's critical that we understand how much is at stake, that our men understand how much is at stake, that the nation understands how much is at stake, and what this means for humanity writ large.
So y'all heard why it is that, despite the fact that I'm supposed to be on a writing sabbatical right now, Barbara Arnwine called me up and said, we have got to do this, right? And this is exactly why. This is perhaps the first time we've actually heard how misogynoir is a tool of vote suppression. Think about it. Discrimination against Black women, saying anything that they can say against Black women is actually a tactic to suppress our vote.
Precisely.
So where are you going to actually understand and hear that except from the words and the experiences of Black women who have been in politics and who understand that this is an Achilles heel in our own community? The inability to see and speak out against the use of misogynoir in our own community. And on that note, who better to introduce into the conversation but the great Maxine Waters? Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Just so wonderful to have you. She is serving her 15th term in the U.S. House of Representatives. She represents the 43rd Congressional District in California. I like to say she's my representative. I don't really, not really, but she is in my heart. She is the first woman and the first African-American chair of the House Financial Services Committee. You all can imagine how busy she is right now. And the fact that she was willing to give us some of her precious time tells us all we need to know about how we need to be squatting up right now. That is what the call of the moment is. So Representative Waters, we have been talking about the historic moment last night, both what we all saw be brought into that room when Kamala Harris stood on the shoulders of so many Black women, and also what was unspoken, because in the punditry afterwards, there were so few people who were literate about what she represented, what she was talking about, what the history of Black women in politics has been, what needs to be done in this moment to provide the resources, and that means all kinds of resources, for this ticket to actually win. So we've just now been talking about the attack on her. And I've been asking folks, what stands out most about some of the ways that she has been attacked as a Black woman? But secondly, are the various constituencies prepared to defend it? Does the Democratic Party have a plan to deal with the anti-Black women politics happening? Do Black people have a plan to deal with it? Do women have a plan to deal with it? So you've been there, you've seen it. Tell us what you're seeing, what you're hoping, what you're worried about.
Well, thank you so very much. I'm just really pleased and delighted to be here this morning. And when I took a look at the way that Barbara had organized this with this wonderful a pamphlet that she put together with all of our pictures on it, and talked about from the base to the face of the Democratic Party, it made me feel really good. It made me feel really good because not only is Barbara always on the case, speaking truth to power and saying what needs to be said. We need to feel good about ourselves and the fact that we are very important to the Democratic Party. And if no one else will say it, we gotta say it. So I'm feeling good. I'm feeling really great about being here today. And I looked at, all of the women who are participating here today, and I thought we ought to take this show and put it on the road.
Yes, y'all hear that? You heard?
Yeah, great.
We ought to take this show and put it on the road, because you have to admit that people are afraid of us. People are afraid of us because we speak out, we say what's on our mind, we speak up for ourselves. And, the norm is to, put you in a box and have you act in such a way that you don't offend anybody, that you don't tell any truths, that you don't let out any secrets. And if doing that means that you are denying your own self, it's okay with everybody else.
Yes.
And we have put up with that.
Yes.
And so this president and others who have talked about Black women in ways that I never even thought I would hear from that high in office. And I want to tell you, I happened to come up on one of these websites and listening to this younger Black man and what he said about Kamala, and it knocked me off my feet in the way he used the nastiest curse words that you could imagine in talking about her. And don't forget, we've got to stop the President of the United States from referring to women, and Black women in particular, as nasty.
Yes.
Now, if he don't want anybody to talk about his wife, he better stop talking about us.
Say it.
Now, that is absolutely outrageous. Where did this word come from in the description of women and Black women? And so we've got a lot of work to do. And I've decided that it is important to, make sure that this president is not reelected. And I'm trying to figure out, and I think I've just about decided what role I can play. I cannot always play the role that is designed for me because I don't know how to basically speak in terms that others would have me speak in. I'm not sure that I could contain myself and be as, quiet as others would have me be. And so I think I have to figure out how to do it. And so I think when I talk about, taking this show on the road, what I'm saying is we've got these issues to talk about. You have defined it already, talking about who we are, what we stand for, and how we will not tolerate being undermined and being discriminated against in very special ways that Black women get discriminated against. We can talk about the issues associated with our families and with our communities and what Black women have done and are doing continuously to deal with, opening up opportunities and calling out those who need to be called out. And so, I know that, when I look at Kamala, she came prepared. And, her history and her career and all of that means that she checked all of the right boxes. And when I looked at her last night and I thought about her background, having served as city attorney, then as district attorney, going to the United States Senate, running for president, she checked all of the boxes in ways that, in politics, historically, they've expected you to check the box. The way that the boxes that they want, those boxes checked. But we don't all look alike. We don't all approach our problems alike. We don't all expect that we are to be accepted in the same way. And so we check different kinds of boxes, not always the expected boxes. And I know that we've got to move our party and, this nation from thinking about us in ways that we all conform to. We all conform to it. We all check the same boxes and we all get chosen. Well, for many of us who don't get chosen, we understand why. We understand that we are being looked at in all kinds of ways. I'm so sick of people talking about our hair, and talking about our clothes and talking about our size, that has nothing to do with whom we are. And so our boxes don't get checked the same. So when I go out on the road, and hopefully when we go out on the road, we're going to talk about ourselves in a different way. We're going to be helpful to the Democratic Party, but on our own terms.
On our own terms.
Okay, I'm going to stop with this.
That's the name of this. We've been looking for it. On our own terms. You named it. You named it. So,
right.
you Congressman Waters, have yourself, been even recently a target of precisely this effort to take down your message by attacking you, the person, attacking you, the Black woman.
Yes.
I'm very interested to know how our would-be allies have shown up when these attacks happen. Where have white women elected officials been when Black women are attacked? Claire McCaskill last week called some of the senators to task, women senators, for not saying anything about the attacks on Kamala Harris. And then on the other side, of the aisle are our brothers. Where have they shown up when Black women have been attacked as Black women? Do we have something that we can, say we need to build on this? This is where you need to come to fore and support us. Or do we have to write the pages in the playbook? Because they really don't exist right now. They really haven't shown up in the way they need to cut off these attacks and undermine the possibility of this ticket.
Unfortunately, those of you who have been involved in politics for many years know that politicians have been taught to protect themselves and no one else. They have been taught that if you want to move up, if you want to get another perk, if you want to be chosen, you can't put yourself at risk by getting out there and supporting someone who perhaps have been thought to have stepped over the line. Because if you do that, you're going to get aligned with that person and you're not going to be able to move up. You're not going to be chosen. You're not going to be, given an opportunity. And so that's what they do. They hear you, they see you, they know when you're being attacked, but it's all about not getting too close to you so that they won't be deemed to be like you and, cause themselves to be left out. Now, having said that, no, when I'm attacked, I'm out there by myself. But of course, fortunately, my feelings don't get hurt easily. Fortunately, I come from a family of 13 children, and we fought, we cursed, we did what we had to do in order to maintain. We loved each other to death, but we interacted in ways that, you were joyful when good things happen, but when you were angry, and you let somebody know it. When somebody, basically maligned you or basically lied on you, you let them know that. And so my feelings did not get hurt. It kind of rolls off, you know what I'm saying? But you know what I have learned to do, and I'm still learning, is not to just take it now. We are taught that don't get into, the dirt with them. As Michelle Obama says, when they go low, we go high. No, and I heard somebody say, and I think it was it's Joy on The View. She said, no, when they go low, we go lower. And so what I'm saying is, I don't believe that you take constant insults and abuse and be quiet. I just don't believe that. I believe that you have a right to stand up for yourself, and that has not been what is acceptable in the political world. You're supposed to be nicer than that. I don't believe that, and I do think that we need to speak up. We need to find ways to do that so that, many folks who are not, as hard-shelled as I am, who do get insulted, you need to relieve yourself of that. You don't need to go to bed at night feeling hurt and bruised and, not knowing if you can make it the next day and not being able to face the next day because you're thinking that's what people think about you. No, we have to stop that. And I think everyone's got to find a way to be able to say what needs to be said in the areas where you are working, whether it's with your colleagues, whether it is in an interview where, perhaps someone, many of these interviews will start out with an assumption, and they have already made up their minds about who you are and what they want to talk about. And you have to say, oh, wait a minute, let me tell you, or I don't think you have considered, and on and on and on. And so to your question and to your discussion, yes, the attacks are there and they are many. And in addition to this president, who, if you notice, don't attack me anymore, after he talked about my low IQ. And then I started to talk about how deplorable he was and talked about, he left me alone and he started talking about other women. But don't forget, he called a woman a dog and nobody spoke up. And don't forget that he's calling Kamala nasty. And we have not really addressed that. And we're going to have to address that. And so I think you're right and you're on point as we get into this discussion. But we will silence people if we confront them head on about the way that we are treated. And I think that we'll all be the better off for it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for that. And I think we all need to hear that, because having our say, saying our piece for all of us has frequently generated precisely the kind of blowback that you talk about. And then on top of that, those who should come to our support actually end up, following the logic that you talked about. I often wonder, where is everybody? Where did they go? Right? You go leading a charge, you look around, and it's like, well, okay, what happened here? So having it explained, I think, is really helpful. Some people are following that logic. You don't get messed up in someone else's stuff, even if you agree to them, because, survival is your number one, imperative. But let's face it, most of us do what we do because we're not just concerned about us. There is a bigger objective. There is a bigger thing that we're trying to do. So if saying what that thing is that we're trying to do gets us in trouble, well, it's good trouble. As we've heard about. So speaking of good trouble, I want to just circle really quickly back to you, Kim, because you're in good trouble. and I want our listeners to hear what a moment like this looks like when you're exercising your discretion in the office that you've been elected to perform in. You do what it is that you say you're there to do. And then because of who you are, because of this space that's open for you to be attacked, you get attacked. What happens when that happens? Who comes to bear? Who doesn't come to bear to defend?
Well, first, I think you saw me like welling up. This was nourishment for my soul, because I have been and am under attack and keep looking around. And I will tell you, as Black women, it gets very lonely, because to the point that you just made, it is about the community we represent, right? It's selfishly, it is easy to get in the box. If you are just worried about your own political future, get in the box, say just what you need to say, don't offend. If it's about you, but when it is about the communities that you serve, when it is truly supposed to be an act of service to them, you have to say the things. You have to say the thing that won't be said. It's not enough to just be there. And so for me, it is a constant attack. It is a constant, and it's ugly. This president has unleashed this demon in a lot of folks that were already there, that, I have been called everything but a child of God. And I've had institutions that are supposed to, whether it's our media, to the point that the Congresswoman just made, where you start a conversation with an assumption that has been made about you. I've spent the last week where someone has said that I have, a special prosecutor was called to investigate how I use my discretion, which is the hallmark of prosecutors, to the frustration of many, that we have absolute discretion. And someone said I abused it because I didn't prosecute as many, that I didn't go as punitive. And now I have to explain to folks, well, why would you do that? In a way that white men have never had to explain it, that in this summer of reckoning around a broken justice system, there's a way that we got here that we haven't put under the microscope in the way that I've been put under the microscope for the last year. And what I've been waiting for is that folks to show up and say that this Black woman is being treated differently. That we see when Black women exercise discretion, whether it's Aramis Ayala in Florida, who says, I'm not gonna prosecute the death penalty, and then the governor comes in and takes her cases away.
Kim, did we lose you?
Women, and we need folks to amplify that, to show up, because we'll do that part, but we need that backup with us.
Yes. And, you know, and thank you for reminding us that, you know, getting elected and exercising the authority of your elected office are just two steps in a long struggle of being able to exercise power. It's not going to be over when, you know, the Biden-Harris team wins. There's going to be ongoing efforts to undermine the exercise of authority. And on this note, what I'm really wondering, and I'm going to come to you with this one, Donna, there seems to be what I would consider to be an asymmetry between what happens in the Democratic Party and what happens in the Republican Party. And I'll put the asymmetry this way. Those folks in the Democratic Party who really embrace, empower, and are the voice of the base. When the big party comes, when the dance comes, they're the wallflowers. They're sitting around, you know, the back of the room. And folks who have never wanted to be in this party, who have never voted for this party, who are not the wheels on this party, actually, you know, seem to be getting more attention. It's hard to imagine on the other side of the aisle the same thing happening. That the soldiers for the base, the ones who represent the most robust articulation of Trumpism, are going to be way on the wall, and Democrats are going to be, you know, front and center. So it just makes me wonder whether the equations are different between the Democrats and the Republicans, or another way of worrying it. Would it be wrong to worry about our party being gentrified, that the folks that, you know, the party cares about the most are these new folks, the Trump refugees, as opposed to the people who've been living there all along, the people who have, you know, taken the hits, the people who need to get mobilized in order for this campaign to really be successful? So is this asymmetry real, or does it look that way from the outside?
Well, I think the Biden campaign made a strategic decision this week to feature Joe Biden, or to pitch him as someone who can heal the divides in our country, someone who can bring both sides of the divides together, someone who is more of a uniter, a healer. And by allowing some of, as you call them, the Trump refugees, some people call them rhino, because they feel like they've left the Republican Party, and there are many of them. I think the campaign made a strategic decision to try to basically persuade everybody, because there are some persuadable Republicans, not a lot, but there are a lot of persuadable independents. And that is the calculation, I think. It is a political strategic calculation. The one thing that I know, not from being an insider, I'm not inside the Biden camp, but the one thing I know just based on what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing is that they're going to treat Black voters, minority voters, and I hope they will treat Latino voters, because there's a serious drop off there from 2016, as persuadable voters. Why is that important? Because if you're only treated as a base voter, you get like 13 cents on the dollar. But if you're a persuadable voter, you get more like 92 cents on a dollar, because they have to find you, they have to identify you, they have to send you 3 or 4 pieces of mail. And although we're not doing a lot of door knocking, they have to target you a lot differently. But I want to go back to something Congresswoman Maxine Waters said earlier, because I have listened to Maxine Waters probably since well, Maxine, I'm telling my age, not you, because you're much younger, but back in the Jackson campaign. And we were so strategic in the Jackson campaign. We knew exactly how to get delegates. We knew how to impact the Democratic Party. We knew how to get on the Rules Committee, the Platform Committee, the Credentials Committee, and Barbara Lee, Maxine Waters. There are so many of us who are still part of this process, still trying to shape it and refine it so that we never allow it to go back to what the Democratic Party used to be. Because, you know, if you're not constantly fighting and putting out your own strategic ideas and your own strategic issues and narrative, it will revert back to form. You know, Reverend Willie Barrow, who was also one of our colleagues on the DNC, God bless her soul, may she rest in peace. She used to say to us, we've never been here before. And we have never been here before. And I'm not just talking about Trump and Trumpism. I'm talking about where both political parties stand today. I mean, our country's in a crisis. And I'm not just referring to COVID and racism and the economy. I'm referring to the lack of trust in all our democratic institutions, which Barbara so eloquently said, lead us to voter suppression. And so I think in this electoral context, knowing that the Democrats cannot get to 270 without us, let's be very real. Even Sister Foxx in Illinois, if she didn't get people out to vote, we're not going to carry those 15 electoral votes. We're not going to carry the electoral votes in New York, okay? We got to make sure that we understand our strategic importance to this election. When you look at Hillary Clinton's defeat in 2016, it was by less than 80,000 votes. 11,000 that could have been made up in Detroit, but they decided they had the damn thing won. They didn't put no more money in the streets. When I say the streets, I'm saying strategically. You got to get people out. You just can't say election day is November 8th. People forget they're working. When you look at the 22 or 23,000 in Wisconsin, no one told Gwen Moore because they stopped polling and they stopped putting resources. When Ed Dell called me from Pennsylvania, I thought he was tripping. He said, I need 300,000. I said, what? You guys, they said you won. I was trying to sneak money down the South because you know me, I wanted to just help out my own people. And yet, this is a strategic calculation when you're involved in these political parties. Where do you want to sit in the party? I've stayed on the Rules Committee since Jesse Jackson made sure that Black people were on the Rules Committee. When Ron Walters got off the Rules Committee, my Black ass got on the Rules Committee. And I ain't left the damn Rules Committee. I fight every year, and every year have the same battle. They're trying to take away the Jackson reforms. Those Jackson reforms, Maxine Waters, no. Those Jackson reform led us to this moment. Ain't nobody gave us a damn thing. We fought for this.
That's right.
Didn't we, Congresswoman? Oh, we used to start
we
more.
did.
We used to raise more help. And look, if I saw Maxine come in the room, I got scared. I would go from being the mild manner, don't cuss nobody out, to wreck. And here's one last thing that everybody should know, and I hope y'all tell this story. Had Black people and Black women in particular not raised their damn voices, the gays, the women, the Hispanics, ain't nobody else would have got there in the room because we opened our mouths and we fought like hell. And once we got in the room and we used to look at each other and we knew what we had to fight for, and we let everybody else in because that's what Shirley Chisholm taught us. That was Jesse Jackson's charge. That's who we are. And let me say one final thing. You know how we started thinking about a woman on a ticket? That came from Jesse Jackson too. And go back to 76 with Maxine Waters. With Barbara Jordan. Barbara Jordan was one of the women that they told Jimmy Carter to consider, but he wouldn't. And Jesse Jackson got mad at that. And Andrew Young had to be checked on that. So this has been a battle that we've been having for a long time inside the Democratic Party from 76. And they gave her the keynote speech because they knew they overlooked her. So let's be clear. When Kamala called the roll last night, she was calling out the names who had come before because we broke those damn doors down. Now we're going to break this ceiling, and they'll never be able to put a damn ceiling above our heads after we break it this time.
Donna, you know, we're talking about diversity and inclusion as if it's a brand new thing. Will you tell people what the Rainbow Coalition was all about? Was that not diversity and inclusion? Did we not go on the reservations with the Indians? Did we not go into farm country with white farmers who were losing their farms and Jesse Jackson saved them? Did we not have Latinos as the national chair of our party in 1988? Well, anyhow, that's what.
And who had the first openly gay staffers? Jesse Jackson.
Jesse
Reverend
Jackson.
Jackson did it all. You know, Matt,
That's right.
Congresswoman, look what I took. This is from the Marconi Center. Remember they said they didn't know if Reverend Jackson, this is the phone from the floor. I took it. That's right. I said, Barbara, I did. Because this was one of the phones. We used to do it the old-fashioned way. I took the damn phone. Okay, this is history. I'm gonna give it to Reverend Jackson. Okay,
Well, I want you to know,
around it to everybody.
I did an interview the other day, and I brought with me the 1984 Jesse Jackson speech that was, so well done. And if you can recall, prior to Jesse coming on, one of the top journalists said, "Mothers, fathers, go get your children." Yes. And bring them. They're about to hear something that has never been heard before. They're about to hear the greatest speech that they'll ever hear in their lives. And I tell you, if you're lucky enough to find one of them, please, it is a collector's item. Get it? I have mine. I'm not going to give you mine. I'm very pleased to be able to show it and talk about it, though.
I wish I'd have known we were going to do props. I would have come to get my 1984 Jesse Jackson for president sweatshirt. I will not put it on because it no longer fits, but I still have it upstairs in my closet. But this is what I worry so much about the strategy that you talked about, Donna, because you all have made clear that it has been the voices and the political strategic brilliance of so many of our leaders, including the two of you, that put us in this position. And it is also the voices of our brilliant strategists who we're not hearing in the center of the party right now. So if we're acknowledging that we're standing on platforms, we're standing on ground that has been tilled and the seeds of these possibilities has been planted, and we're also saying that these are not the people that this right now the party is trying to center, then to me, I'm seeing a problem. I'm worried about this. I'm seeing the party moving away from everything that got us to this moment, coveting refugees, and basically saying, as you pointed out, the core of the party, we're getting 13 cents on the dollar, to bring them in. So it's sort of like our loyalty and our brilliance is a disadvantage in this moment.
No. It's strategic. It's very strategic because look, they know. No. This is why we're having this conversation. We have to develop our own messaging. We have to develop our own tactics. We have to go to the party and say, if you want the electoral votes of this state, here's what we need. Remember, this is decentralized. I can't have a national strategy. I gotta have a strategy in every state, right? What do you need to get the vote out? What do you need to protect the vote? What do you need to communicate with those voters who are infrequent? We need to come up with our own strategy. I'm not saying anything bad or good or indifferent. I'm just saying in this moment, we've never been here before. So we can't use the old strategic playbook. We know it won't work because we have never had a Black woman on the ticket.
That's right. Mm-hmm. That's right.
So
we come up with our own playbook.
What are the strategy? What's the messaging right now? So I'm going to ask everyone and start with you, Representative Waters and Kirsten. I really want to hear your sense about what the wider public needs to hear, and then everyone else. So what needs to be, what needs to happen? And so what needs to be the demand? What are the conditions of possibility that need to be put in front of the Democratic Party, that need to be put in front of the media, that need to be put in front of our organizations? This is a unique moment. So uniquely, what do we need to do? Representative Waters.
Well, I'm not so sure I have all the answers except to say this. I am worried that we don't have the excitement that I think is needed in order to advance, the party to the winning of the presidency. I think that we need to find out and think about what is it going to take to fire up our constituencies and those who may not be what we consider our constituencies, but who would come along with us if we can inspire them and motivate them. And so what I'm convinced about, it cannot happen with Democratic Party as usual. It really has got to have an injection of fire in order to really get people, wanting to get out there and work. We're in a difficult situation. Look, we're here on a virtual meeting right now. Do you know that in many of our communities, these meetings will never take place? Right. Do you know that we have seniors who are not connected, to the internet? Right. Do you know that we have seniors who don't know this technology? And I don't know that even in those living centers where they are, anybody is helping to make that happen. And so here we are. We need to have these virtual meetings. People are not on the street knocking on doors the way that you would normally do if you didn't have COVID-19. And so we need to think about, and what do we do about this, and how do we do it? How do we get the messages out and to the people who are not connected to the internet and, not a part of, getting their messaging, their news, whatever from their computers or, from websites, et cetera. Mm-hmm. We need to think about what we're going to do. And it seems to me that not enough thought has gone into that yet. I have gone into senior citizen centers where the administrators or the managers don't even know whether the people in the center are registered to vote. Mm. And when I finally, convinced them to get them down into the community room so that I could talk with them, I'd learned in talking with the seniors, some of them didn't know whether they were registered to vote or not. They don't know when the last time that they voted. They don't know whether or not when they moved from one place to the other, they changed their registration. I mean, and there are, I don't know what percentage of our population are, considered seniors now, but I think it's huge. And I think that we need to talk about a strategy to deal with that. And it has something to do with the people who are on the inside doing the management of these centers and these homes, that we could enlist to take on the responsibility of educating. When these absentee ballots get sent out, and if they get to us, if we can deal with this president and his new postmaster general there, so that we have a United States Postal Service that's working. When these absentee ballots get to these centers, they're going to get placed, on, the top of the refrigerator somewhere in some of these homes, in particular with our seniors that will just put them aside. Who's going to help them? I'm worried about that. We need a strategy for that. I'm not so sure, except what I'm alluding to about getting people inside with the responsibility to help out, to guide, and to make sure that the seniors are participating. So we need to think about more strategies. I think that perhaps we need to think about lighting up our communities in the old-fashioned way. The bullhorns and the cars driving through, today is election day. Tomorrow is election day. Don't forget to vote. If you need to know where your polling place is, if it's not an absentee ballot, then call this number. I mean, I think that, the old parades with the bullhorns, waking up the community is going to be necessary, and people won't be necessarily walking, but they'll be riding in trucks and cars and getting people fired up. We need to think about a lot of these things.
So much, Representative Waters. And it reminds us too that we need to get everybody fired up, not just for the election, but for afterwards. One of the big lessons, I think, from the last time was not to be demobilized after we mobilize, right? Because that's just the first step. After that, there's the question of the agenda. There's the question of when who are going to be the squeaky wheels that get the grease? And if we demobilize after we elect people, much of the agenda that we hope to be advanced may not be. So it's a two-step process that sometimes we forget about. Kirsten, what do you think needs to happen to create this energy that Representative Waters is talking about? You're muted.
Things.
There you go.
I think of two things. One, I think about Zora Neale Hurston saying, if we're silent about our pain, they'll kill us and say we enjoyed it. I think about the Combahee River Collective saying that if Black women are free, that would mean everyone would have to be free, because our freedom would necessitate the destruction of all systems of oppression. And when we take those two things, and we have someone like a Joe Biden, who, even though we can talk about the Violence Against Women Act, we have Kerry Washington on stage who played Anita Hill. Where was that for Anita Hill? When we talk about change and creating energy around people, we have Black and Indigenous and Latino kids and young adults on the streets protesting the murders and the lynchings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and going back to, Alton Sterling and Michael Brown and Trayvon Martin and all these people. And you have the nominee saying he doesn't believe in defunding police. He believes they need more money. And then you have somewhere like Kim said in Chicago, and it's a really good thing to look at, because you have someone like a Lori Lightfoot who stands at the intersections of Black, queer, womanhood. And there are police officers beating people in the streets right now. There was this teachers union who said they were holding their contract because they wanted unhoused kids, mostly Black kids, to have protections before they signed their contract. And she stood in opposition of that. So when we talk, and you have Jennifer Hudson saying the change gonna come in 2020. And we're crying and we're emotional, but God damn, when is the change coming? James Baldwin said, you took my mother's time, my father's time, my uncles, my aunts, my nieces. How much time do you want for your progress, right? How many pounds of Black flesh do you want? How many pounds of Black women's flesh do you want for this progress? So I want, in this moment, when we talk about energy and excitement, it's the politics of it all, but it's also the politics of being Black people just in general and surviving in this country. The politics of being Black women and surviving in this country. We can talk about, they're calling Kamala a hoe and they're calling her a bed wench, and we're upset about that. Are we talking about protections for sex workers?
Yeah.
Right? We can talk, we're upset because, they're police, and what are we going to do about the police officers? Are we talking about the fact that it is a genuine, legitimate concern when she expressed pride in being the top cop, right? When there is a law that was meant to intimidate Black women around truancy? Do we talk about that? Do we go to those people and we say, hey, we get it. Your anger, your resentment, all of that stuff is legitimate, but what do we do now, right? There's Black history and there's Black futures. How do we get ourselves in a position where we can fight to live another day? And I don't think that entails holding people accountable after they get in office, because the power is the point. So once they're there, what do we have to stand on? And I want us to look at, I just want to bring the movement into this place. I want to bring Ferguson in this place. I want to bring Baltimore, where we had Black people in leadership who call, protesters thugs, where we had, at one point, I don't want to delegitimize the fact that it's not that there was more excitement around Obama than there is this time. It's the fact that we had a Black attorney general, we had a Black president, and we saw what was not done for Black people. And we cannot underestimate how many people were radicalized out of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me just, because everything that you say, I mean, it is so correct. It is so right, until it's even painful to think about all that needs to be done. And when I talk about taking the show on the road, I'm not talking about going and talking with anybody to get any permission to do this. And when I go out to talk,
Yes.
and when we go out to talk, we have to talk like you're talking right now. And we should not ask anybody. I don't even want to negotiate with them to be a part of what? Because look, if you talk the way that you talk and think the way that we're thinking, you just have to use your platform and respond to communities and invitations and talk what we need to talk. And that's how I think we may be able to bring about change more than saying, somebody saying to us, I promise you, when I get elected, I'm going to do exactly what you're asking me. That's what you don't want to hear. What you want to do is you want to go and create that kind of excitement and inspire people so that people are saying, yeah, that's what we want. And then when the acceptable people, come, to talk, they'll say, but yeah, we want to ask you about this. We just heard about that. So I'm really, 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 Donna, I'm really not talking about negotiating with anybody, to be a part of anything. I'm talking about when you have an opportunity to go to Philadelphia to a church or to, any other organization, a sorority, a fraternity, what have you, speak your truth. Speak what you believe needs to be talked about, because the more people hear that, the more people are going to ask other people, what do you think about this? I think that this ought to be done. And so when I talk about, thinking about how I can, be a part of, that's what I'm really talking about. I'm talking about, taking your power and speaking about those issues in the way that they need to be spoken about, and helping people to get to the point where they say, well, I feel comfortable in asking, Biden or Kamala or Perez or my congressperson, because I've never heard them talk about this issue before.
Right.
So that's what I'm talking about. And so when I say take this show and, and put it on the road, that's really what I'm alluding to.
You got it. You got it.
Let's bring Barbara in, because Barbara,
you got it.
This was partly, the idea, right? We need to hear from Black women, and obviously there's a diversity among even progressive Black women about what needs to happen now, and we know what we're united on, that this conversation needs to happen. So what are our marching orders from your vantage point, Barbara?
Well, there are several. First of all, I want to say to my Congresswoman, Maxine Waters, just thank you for being here, because we know, DNC's going on. You and Donna, you guys are being pulled every which way. So thank you so much. And I think your Sermon on the Mount, I'm going to call it the Black Woman Sermon on the Mount that you get.
You can do a sermon. Let me tell you about her Aretha Franklin sermon. Congresswoman. Go ahead, Barbara.
Sermon, and let's do that clip, because Black women are going to get energy from that and some healing. That was a powerful message. And on November 3rd, listen, folks, early voting starts in many states in September.
That's right.
We got to get ready right now. We don't have any time to sit around and play games. I am so happy, Congresswoman Waters, that you said what you said, because what we have been saying, and when I say we, I mean the Transformative Justice Coalition that I head up, and all of our partners and coalition members, of which there are more than 40. As you know, 2 weeks ago, we had 38,000 people who tuned in to some of our organizing strategies. And we really were after organizers to get people to get into this fight, because we got some work to do. But our whole message is our march to the ballot box, which means that when you were talking about parades, yes, we intend to organize and work with people around the country. They have, these kind of marches, these parades during early voting, during, November 3rd. We also, need to make sure that our young people, people should know, my heart has always been in young people. And, I'm a mother of one, but I come from a family of 12. So I know what you were talking about. I laughed. I said, that's something we had never talked about, and we got us a connection. So I believe in, our young people very strongly, and, training and working with our young so that they are doing what they can do to get out here and be poll workers, to get out here and help with the outreach, to be out here and make sure that the campuses are organized, even though they're dispersed. There's a lot to be done. There's a lot we can do. We can be creative in this time. But I want to just encourage everyone, if you're listening and if you're saying, hey, I want to be part of this fight, darn it, I'm standing up, because people are telling me, Maxine, that if, and Donna and Ari and Kirsten and Kim, that if they got to put on, puffy jackets and roll to the polls, they're going to be there. They said that they going to crawl, they're going to put on knee pads, they're going to do whatever they got to do, because they're going to vote. They're going to have on everything, sheets, whatever, that they're going to vote. And we got to understand there's energy out there. The question is, how do you mobilize it? How do you help it? How do you take down all this voter suppression? How do you get, how you push aside all this nonsense, this discouragement nonsense? How do you really do it? Because the people want to vote. They had it. They want to be heard. They are through. And they want to be heard, and we got to clear the field so that they can make it to the goalposts. And that means that we have to do this work. So if you're listening, I'm saying to you every darn morning, you get up, you look in that mirror and you say one thing to yourself, and that is, I am a voting rights champion. Mm-hmm. I'm going to fight not only for my right to vote, but for everybody's. Mm-hmm. I'm going to not only be calling to those centers in my neighborhood and saying, come on, let's talk about what's going on for making sure everybody's registered to vote. We can help you go through that list. We can help tell you who's registered, who's not. We got to be able to do that. And we got that information. So I want us right now, go to votingrightsalliance.org, votingrightsalliance.org. Join us. We're actively organizing. I'm not sleeping. I was up until 3 this morning, working on how we're going to mobilize people, working on how we're going to do this, because we're not going to let this moment pass. One thing you never get back is time. Time get by.
That's so true. That's so true.
In the moment, you got to exercise that moment. Don't ever think you can come back or put it on hold. No. Time it moves. It has no respect for human beings. It just moves. And we have to move with it. So this is our moment, folks. It's imperative for Black women. That's why we created this space today, because Black women got to be heard.
Woo! All right, Reverend Barbara.
All right.
I'm gonna have to leave you. Thank you so very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
You're welcome.
Sister.
I want to thank you all. Kim, want to give us a benediction?
I mean, I can't follow that up other than, it resonates that we got to lead with what got us here as Black women, which is not hiding our pain and not hiding the barbs that we've had to go through, no matter where they came from. And as it has been pointed out, it comes from every space. And that is what makes us so uniquely qualified to lead, is because we've had to be able to thrive in all circumstances within our homes and outside. And, as Congresswoman said, what I missed from last night was the gather everybody into the room moment to herald what was happening with this Black woman being there, that this isn't like a Disney princess that let's marvel that we have one in the fold. For this woman to have gotten there, she went through many barbs and many fences and many wires, and we'll support her and hold her to account. But this isn't a moment that was crafted by somebody's playbook. This was blood, sweat, and tears for the women who got us here before. And so I'm just inspired by the diversity of the voices here and the energy. And I want to say it's true. It is, let's hold to account as we get there. Let's protect once we are there. We know it has been documented and said that the most unprotected person in this world is the Black woman. And we can't just know it and say it and put it on our Facebook post, we have to like live it. And the living it means putting all of our energy and effort into protecting one another and building that force around us. But it is owning that we need that protection. It is owning that there will be those who come and seek to harm and hurt us, as they have in all of our history, and that we have to be armed up for that. And so up and down the ticket, up and down. And what I will say about Senator Harris, when I first got elected, she was the first person who reached out to me and, you know, said to me there were things that she wished she could have done that now it is my obligation to do. So she did reach her hand back so that she wasn't the first Black DA in San Francisco. She helped the first Black one in Chicago, who then allowed me to help the first Black one in Boston. And that's what's required. And that's what we do. And so we got to show up and show out in the ways that we always have on November 3rd, taking nothing for granted. Because I assume that this race actually got more unstable when the Black woman came, because it then draws out all of those who would stand up in ways that they wouldn't have had to before. So I'm excited. I'm hyped. I've been filled by this. And I would say up and down the ticket. Up and down the ticket. Let us hope and pray that as we have a Black woman at the top, it continues to draw the rest of us through, whether it's on the school boards that have left off Fannie Lou Hamer out of our books, or the library board, or others, that we need to show up and show out across the board and support Senator Harris's leadership as she goes through this gauntlet, because it's coming.
And Kim, are you on the ticket coming up?
I am. I'm now, for my selfish part, yes, I am on the ticket on November 3rd. And it is a referendum of what it looks like. You know, to Kirsten's point, we can get into these jobs and we could do the easy thing. But we demand better than that for ourselves. And so the attacks are hard, the attacks are real, the attacks on me are vicious. And I will say there have been moments just today that I asked myself, why did we do this? And watching Congresswoman Waters not even know that she was giving a word directly to my spirit was like, okay, let me roll that off. But it requires us to be just as vigilant, because Kirsten, it is easy to sit at intersections and do the thing that doesn't shake the table. I say, you know, that Shirley Chisholm, you bring the fold-ins here. I'm like, set the menu. We've been eating things for so long, grateful to be at the table, to have gotten a plate. I want to be as picky as my brunch mates who say, don't put that, don't add that, don't. They come away fully satisfied and not bloated and discomforted because they did not apologize for asking for what they wanted and what they needed and what satisfied them. And that's what we have to do. And when we do it, we have to protect each other.
Yes.
Great
And
point.
please let us all know what we can do from across the country to answer that call, Kim.
Yeah, we're gonna bring the road show to Chicago. We're gonna do a virtual
Yes.
fundraising talk, like bring the road show to Chicago and get us inspired.
And we'll bring the tables and the menu. So I'm mindful of the time. We thought that we'd be in and out, but then we also know when we get going, we can get going. So I want to thank all of you for joining us today. This was a historic conversation following a historic nomination last night. We're at a pivotal point in history. And I am just blessed to have been on this call with women who can carry us to a better future. Or in the words of Maxine Waters, a group that can build a better America on our own terms. So let me thank, first of all, the guests, Representative Maxine Waters, State Attorney Kim Foxx, TJ Fee, Barbara Arnwine, Donna Brazile, and Kirsten West Savali. If there's one lesson to emerge from our conversation today, it's that this historic presidential campaign, it's just not enough for us to celebrate the symbolic dimensions of this nomination. We've got to fully address the status of Black women in the country, in the party, and throughout electoral politics. So if we don't claim this moment, if we don't counter galvanize against all of this mainstream stuff that's going on that would make her candidacy nothing more than symbolic, then this might be a moment that we could lose, and we're determined not to lose it. So this is the time for us to have our say. Continue to follow us at African American Policy Forum. Follow me on Twitter at Sandy Locks. We'll continue to provide information to galvanize us, support us as we do. Thank you all for being with us. Have a great day. Stay safe, stay strong as we continue to organize and resist in the fight for intersectional justice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Black and Beautiful Lounge.